If you've ever wondered which pattern making books were worth your time and money, today's video is for you. I'm going to go over 8 popular pattern making books, their strengths, their weaknesses, and who they're best for. And to make it easy for you, I put together this comprehensive free guide of all the books. You can get the link in the description below. And at the end of the video, I'll let you know which book is my favorite. Now let's dive in. For each book, we'll go over how beginner friendly, how in depth, the type of visuals, the teaching style, and who they're best for. All the books we're going over today teach basic sloper creation, dart manipulation, how to get the perfect fit. They also go over sleeves, collars, and bodice variations. The biggest difference you're going to see is the approach, whether they're technical, visual, or creative. Some of the books are in metric and others are imperial, so that is one major difference, but conversion is not too big of a deal in those instances. And then thirdly, what is the audience? Some of them were really made for fashion students and other ones maybe be better for home sewists. And then the last one is how in depth the books go. Some are very surface level and others are very, very comprehensive. The first book we're going to look at is the Pattern Making Primer. The author is Joe Barnfield and Andrew Richards. This is actually one of the newest books that I have, so I have not spent a lot of time on this one. I have not drafted any slopers from this. It is a very, very nice presentation. I really love the visuals in the book, and it's really great for beginner learners. It goes over some of the basics, like what are seams and darts and different types of fabric. I think one of the big downsides I see from this is it gives you a sloper that you're supposed to print off and enlarge, and then it just shows you how to manipulate that sloper, but it doesn't show you how to create a sloper from scratch. But that could be a benefit to some beginner sewists. Perhaps they don't want to create a sloper from scratch because it seems too daunting. So this might be a really great book for beginners, and they can learn how to manipulate a sloper with these really excellent visuals and explanations. And then maybe some point in the future, they could decide to tackle actually drafting one from scratch. The next book that is really great for beginners is The Practical Guide to Pattern Making for Fashion Designers by Knowles. This book is very good step by step. The visuals are excellent. They really give a lot of explanation on how to create your sloper. This does take 33 measurements to create your sloper, which is on the high side of all these pattern making books, which I prefer because I do think that the more measurements you take, the better the fit is going to be. And when I drafted a sloper from this book, I got an excellent fit. So I really, really loved that. But generally, this has less detail than the Armstrong book, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing because I don't think a book has to be everything on a topic. It really is excellent if you want to learn how to draft a sloper. I think the instructions are very clear, and it gives plenty of information on fit and design variations as well. Then we're going to take a look at Building Patterns by Suzy. This is a very good step-by-step book. It has an excellent progression taking you into making a skirt. Then the next step it has you doing is what's called a moulage, and it's a bodice that fits you skin tight. So that is an added step in this pattern making book, which does make the process much, much longer. The advantage of a moulage, though, is that you get that to fit you like a glove, and then only after that fits you do you add ease. So you do get an excellent fit. The one thing that I didn't prefer about this book, though, is that it drafts the bodice and the skirt at the same time. So you get, a sloper down to your hips. And that would be fine for someone who has very standard measurements. But for someone like me, who I have larger hips than I do my waist and my bust, it does make the fit not as good. So I do prefer those books that draft those two things separately. So they'll draft the bodice to the waist, and then they draft the skirt to the hip separately. And I do believe that you get a better fit that way, because you can really, make, it fit each of those dimensions. So that's the one negative that I would say to this, if you don't have a standard form. She does take 15 measurements, which I think the number of measurements she takes are good. She particularly puts a lot of focus on where the apex is, which I think is so important to identify the apex, because everything sort of works around that. So you do get a very clear apex, but so you end up getting a pretty good fit garment from this, but it's very, very time consuming. I would say this is best for beginner to intermediate sewists. This was one of the first slopers that I did, and I found it easy to follow. But there is a lot going on with trying to make that moulage first. And the next book is from Dennis Chunman Low. I only have a digital copy of that book, so I will put it up here. This book has a very modern aesthetic, but it does assume some level of knowledge beforehand. I did find the instructions a little bit difficult to follow, and in my opinion, it relies too heavily on standard measurements. When I'm going to be drafting a sloper, I want to rely only on my own measurements and not those of some standard, because the standard is rarely my measurement. So I'm not really a big fan of ever using standard measurements. I do like that it drafts the bodice and the skirt separately, and it is less comprehensive than some of the other books on the list, but I don't think that's necessarily a negative, because I do think a shorter, more directed book, it can be a good thing. And I think this book is best for creative intermediate sewists. And we're going to look at Fashion Pattern Making Techniques by Antonio Donnanno. This also is a newish book for me, so I have yet to draft a sloper from this. It has beautiful illustrations, very detailed illustrations. The instructions assume a lot of knowledge, so it is not as detailed in how to create each. But what I really, really do love about this book is that it shows you how to create the sloper, both a skirt sloper and a bodice sloper separately, which, I love that. But then it goes one step further and gives you a lot of variations in how to modify those sloper patterns into a wide variety of designs. So probably one of the best in terms of giving you so many different design choices. This asks you to take 15 measurements to create your sloper, which sounds pretty reasonable. I know I have done some slopers that ask for 3 measurements, which I think is ridiculous. And I didn't even talk about that book here, because I just don't think that's practical to only do 3 measurements. You're just not going to get a good fit with that. So since I have not drafted this sloper, I can't attest to how good it is, but I will at some point, and then I can review this book for you. We have the oldest book in the group. This was published in 1961, and it does not have great graphics. It definitely has an older feel to it, but the information in this book is excellent. It really explains a lot in terms of why you're doing certain things when you're creating the pattern. So I really enjoyed reading all of this. It really, really, for someone who's more of an intermediate or advanced sewist, I think you're going to get a lot from this book. I don't think it would necessarily be great for beginner sewists. It only asks you to take 8 measurements, which I think is insufficient. I did not get a good fit when I made this sloper. It's basically, you have like a tight or a loose, sloper they're asking you to create. I think it relies too much on standard measurements, and then it wants you to fit, in the fitting stages. I think it's more geared towards making commercial patterns since people are standard size, so they rely on those standard measurements. So I don't think that's good for a home sewist who wants to use their own measurements so they can get a perfect fit. But there is a lot of value. I'm really glad I have this book because of all that other information. Again, I think it's best for intermediate or advanced sewists. This is a very popular book. It's Metric Pattern Cutting for Women's Wear with Winifred Aldrich. And so I use Imperial, so I had to convert, but that's not a big deal. The visuals are sort of old. This was published in 1988. I found that the sloper that I drafted had the only dart was going to the corner of the neck, which I found to be an odd placement. I'd always want to be moving that every single time, so I didn't love that. It used standard measurements for that dart. So if you had anything other than a standard bust size, it's not going to fit you well. You're going to have to do a lot of fitting, which, I would prefer to take more measurements and then not have to fit so much afterwards. This only takes 12 measurements, and the fit that I got after this was not great. So it was not my favorite method. I think this is good for intermediate or advanced sewists. There's not a lot of hand holding going on, and it's very technical. So it's not one of my favorites. And the last one we have is Patternmaking for Fashion Design by Helen Joseph Armstrong, which is a favorite of fashion design schools. You can see it's like a tome. It's very, very comprehensive. It just goes into how to draft your sloper. It does have you draft the bodice and the skirt separately, which I love. It does ask you to take 34 different measurements, which I think is excellent. So when I use this to draft my sloper, I got an excellent fit. I would definitely recommend that. There were a few things that I found a little off, like it said, put down where you want your princess seam. I'm like, I don't know where I should put the princess seam. So a little more guidance there would have been useful. Measuring the armhole would have been good if I had a front armhole measurement and a back, because, just to make sure that I'm placing that in the right place. But generally, it was excellent, and it was easy to follow and very comprehensive. And then the rest of the book is going to go into a lot of different design variations for skirts and dresses and pants. So it is really an excellent resource, but it can be a little overwhelming for a beginner. So I think this would be better for an intermediate or advanced sewists. It also can get quite pricey. This book, I bought a old edition, which I would recommend getting a used and an older version, because I don't think it probably changes very much. So that is the way that I was able to get the cost down significantly on this book. And as promised, I told you I'd let you know which was my favorite, and that would be The Practical Guide to Pattern Making by Lori Knowles. This comes probably a close second to Helen Joseph Armstrong's book. They have very similar approaches, but I sort of liked this one. There were a few subtle things that she did that I really liked and thought was preferable. So I love this book, but I like having a wide variety of books because each of them provided something different that was interesting, and then I incorporated in the way I'm drafting my sloper. So I do think it's so important to have a lot of different viewpoints, and I love my sloper now, and I learned so much from all of them and sort of like compiled my own way of putting together a sloper. If you want to learn how to get your hands on a sloper, check out this video here. Remember to grab the free comprehensive guide of all the books. Link in the description below. Let me know which of these books you have and you love. And if you want me to do a deep dive into any of these books where we can go into all the pros and cons. Since this was sort of just a broad overview, let me know in the comments and I can create a future video on that. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.